All right. Welcome, everybody, for joining us at the 1-year anniversary of the Sales Development Framework book. First and foremost, I'm super excited to get to not only introduce, and yes, I do have my book. Darryl, I see you in the corner. You're already ready to go. I think you're in the book somewhere. I don't remember what page. I think I ended up flipping it. And anyway, that's a whole other story. But I'm thrilled to be here because not only is this a book that I think we're going to be able to dissect and really talk about the key framework, but we're going to have a lot of fun. I think in today's world in webinars, people get so confused with, like, if I'm going to go to a webinar, there's not going to be much engagement. I'm here in 2022 here to flip the script. We're going to start doing a lot more engagement at Tenbound in future webinars, conferences, where we want to hear from you. Like, it's not about us on the stage. I mean, a lot of us, it could be, right? About this event, about the sales development framework. It's definitely going to be about the book today and the framework. But, we want to hear specifically how we can best serve the community and you as a person and professionally. But today, congratulations, 1 year, David Dulany, Kyle Vamvouris. I know I kind of botched the name, so I apologize in advance on the 1 year.
Thank you for congratulations.
No, that's great. And so, and then Darryl, we also have Darryl Praill, CMO, and I'm going to botch it as well. It's going to be, it's a tongue twister, agoraphobia.
Agora Pulse, baby. Do you know what the Agora is? The Agora is where all the Greeks got together and talked about politics and life and discussion. We right now are at an Agora.
That is correct. And I'd like to point out there's one Greek on this call as well. So
there you go, right?
We're a good company.
But I just want to know, how can our own hosts mess up a name that rhymes with the word sale, which is what this is all about? I just don't get it. Just putting it out there.
Yeah, no, that's a partyfoul.com/that's on me. So I think I'm going to start with a new LLC. Wait, did that rhyme? Yeah, I guess it did. Yeah. So, but yeah. And then also, Steve, not going to leave you out of the, Steve Eror, Director of Sales at Chat Funnels. We absolutely love you guys. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy day to connect with us.
Yeah, happy to be here. I'll be honest. The only part of me that's Greek, I know the Greek alphabet from college days. I learned the Greek alphabet. That's as close as I get.
Respect.
So
yeah. I love it. I mean, I don't look Greek. My mom's 100%. That makes me half. So definitely a Greek guy. So Opa, Bani Kopitava. I can speak a little bit Paquito, but that's Espanol, so that's a whole other thing. But kind of moving forward, I think many of the viewers might be wondering, like, hey, like, the $1 million question, what's this like golden ticket thing? Well, you're going to have to stay tuned. Not going to, I'm going to keep you hanging a little bit as the winners are going to really be rewarded and engaged throughout the webinar with Sales Development Framework books. So we're going to be giving these bad boys to you. So as we discuss the book, a few of the questions that, I'm going to be asking the guests, which is 1, 2, 3, you gentlemen, please type in the chat. Like, if there's questions you have, we'll pause and we want to answer the questions or, things that have been working with you and how the book can apply. We would love to, answer those questions. And so here's the kicker. Bring it in. The more engagement, the more tickets that you will get for drawing the golden ticket, which is 1 year free of Tenbound Plus. So stay tuned at the end to get the book. Plus have the opportunity to win a seat at the Tenbound Plus table. It's almost like giving away, you're going to be like a founding member within Tenbound Plus as we're about to launch this. Can't give too much information, but we're going to be notifying the winners end of day on Friday via email, which is a value of $2,148. But I could continue to keep going on, but I will kind of pause there for a moment. And I want to get this thing kicked off. And I think I'm going to start with the viewers here is please press 1 if you've had horrible webinar experiences. Can I see some ones come up on the right-hand side? I mean, okay, I see 1, 2. There's, only 2 people have had bad experiences. Oh man, this thing is just blowing up. Whoa. Yeah. So Fact of the matter is, we're changing that up, like I mentioned a little bit earlier. And I think the best way to kind of start this engagement is I'm going to start asking some questions to the viewers, not the viewers, more so the panelists, and David and Kyle himself, and the other beautiful folks on the call as well. So, Kyle, maybe I'll start with you. Once again, congratulations on the book. I absolutely love it. Read it again last night. The day in the life, right? What the day of the life and the role of an SDR, like what are the key takeaways from this book that you can really tell the folks that are listening today on the webinar?
So there's a bunch, right? If you're running a inside sales team, specifically, let's talk about SDRs here because that's the topic of the book. If you're running a sales development team, there are a lot of responsibilities. And one thing that David and I, when we were talking about putting this book together, that we really wanted people to walk away with is a clear roadmap of what it takes to be successful in this role. It's no secret for a lot of the people on the call who are in this role today that it is a difficult one. You're dealing with a team of typically entry-level people who need a lot of coaching and guidance, but also there's a lot of performance metrics that get baked into the cake there, which makes this role incredibly challenging. So we wanted to give people a roadmap or a guide to help them get through that role successfully. And I want to talk a bit here, just because of the question, how do you spend your time as a manager of a sales development team? I'll share my opinion, then maybe David give yours. Darryl, I know, and Steve, you guys both have a lot of thoughts on this as well. For me, I want SDR managers spending the dominant portion of their days coaching and developing the reps and helping them become more successful. I look at the role as one where we look at data, determine where we need to focus on to improve, and then executing on training and coaching to help improve those areas of the team, and then rinse and repeat as we keep adding new people and as our needs keep changing. So the answer to the question, the day in the life, coaching, development as much as I can, and then the rest, a little bit of data, managing up whatever I have to do. But I try to segment at least 70-80% of my day to just helping my team be more successful.
No, that's great. Hey, no, Darryl, chime in. I want to hear from you.
Well, that's awesome, David. Thank you so much. I'm confused. Is it David Denver, David Dulany? Like, do we need to have the word David in their name to work for Tenbound?
Can I make a proposal that we just call David Dulany beardless?
Yes, I like that. That's right. He who has no beard and didn't get the memo. So I love what Kyle's saying.
Or something. Okay.
And I fully agree that it's got to be coaching, but I'll add a tweak to it. I think half your time is going to be spent coaching, and probably half the time is going to be spent doing the assessment and the data analysis, so you can do coaching, right? So assessment could be you're listening to call recordings, you're looking and you're drilling in on the data of the conversion ratios and everything else, right? You're actually making sure that they're following the qualification processes that you've taught them. You're making sure that they're actually reaching out. You're looking at what they're doing on LinkedIn or whatever it might be. So half the time I would suggest is training. The other half is actually assessing, so you can do the training and be informed. And I'll give one more caveat here because I see this happen all the time. Training, coaching is not the sales manager saying, hey, Joe, or hey, team, just saw this. Make sure you do that, and never circling back to that. Okay, that's not coaching. That's just called abdicating your responsibilities. There you go. I'll shut up.
One thing I'd like to add is I think that management as a whole, when you're actually managing people, your job is one thing, is to get all the obstacles out of the way from your reps from being successful at their job. And sometimes that obstacle is a knowledge gap. Sometimes it's a process gap. Sometimes it's, let's be honest, sometimes, I look at my own attitude. Sometimes it's an attitude gap, right? You need to help adjust and improve, that attitude or the sentiment. Whatever it is, as a manager, that's what you should be focusing on. How am I helping my SDRs or my reps do their job better? And whatever mix you have it, whether it be 50%, whether it be 80% coaching, everything you should be doing should be that. And whether, I tend to think that, managers should be more in the trenches, right there, like sitting, listening to calls, doing role plays, where a director should be more, thinking, on a larger strategic level, like this is the direction we want to go in as a team. All of that is about removing those obstacles out of the path of your reps.
I want to build on just one more point, and exactly what Steve just said. If you're trying to remove the obstacles from your reps and you're a manager, one of your key skills that most of you forget, and so if you're like a VP or something, make sure this happens, is teaching them to constantly communicate up and not just down. So the idea of saying, hey, boss woman, I have just observed that my team sucks at qualifying. Yes, we train them on it. You should know. I've got a plan. Here it is. This is what's going to happen. Here's the timeline. If I need your help, I'll let you know. If you don't do that, because what's going to happen is, just clear, your SDRs, they are going to disappoint you. They are going to screw up. They are going to ignore your coaching and your training. And the big guys up top are going to come down to the sales manager, the SDR manager, and say, this is your job. Why am I just finding out about it now? So you're not an SDR anymore. You're not one of the guys anymore. You're an SDR manager. You're managing the whole process up and down. That's critical advice.
100%. And I just wanted to say, there's so much there as far as when people get promoted into an SDR manager job. A lot of times what we see is that they're so relieved finally. Oh, I don't have to make cold calls anymore. And now I can just sort of manage people. And something we talk about in the book is the Dashboard Cowboy. So it's basically, we see this a lot. I mean, and you get in and you just start refreshing the dashboard every day and then sort of beating people over the head with the metrics and it's stepping away a little bit from the daily grind that you were trying to get away from in the first place. But it's actually, as Kyle, when we started first talking about this, it's the opposite. You've got to get more into it. And another thing is you've got to be able to show that you can still do the SDR job and you're good at it. Otherwise you lose credibility with the team pretty quickly. So it's a delicate balance, especially when it comes into, if you're not used to managing up and interacting with senior executives, that's something you got to learn pretty quickly as well.
On that topic, the one thing I will say about the book, on pages 9 and 10, if you don't have the book, pages 9 and 10.
Do you have the book?
I mean, I don't want to take away what you're doing here, Mr. Denver, but the whole sales development self-assessment, that is a come to Jesus survey that you need to take to assess how you progress after taking that survey through the rest of the book. Because too many of you will think you're awesome managers, and you're not.
One thing you mentioned the Dashboard Cowboy, David, beardless, and I remember at one point I had just been made I was managing the business development for the Americas for this one company, and before I had taken the job, I had planned this trip to Paris with my wife and I, and we were in Paris, and literally here's this team that was struggling, that I had just gotten hired. I'd been there for like a month, and they were struggling, and all I had was my phone, and I figured out I could access the Salesforce dashboards from Paris from my hotel room. And I was sitting there seeing like they were underperforming while I was there and pounding off the most angry, let's be honest, vitriolic messages to my team. Why are you guys acting like this? You think because I'm not there? And I look back on it and I'm embarrassed with the way that I managed, because I wasn't at the time understanding the whole story around what was going on. It turns out one of the reasons dials were down for this one guy is because he had a really good email cadence and he was doing intro calls all week. And so it's like, you need to understand the context as well as, and then I also think a good manager, and I've had a CEO do this at a company I was at. We used to do executive challenges. We're great. Mr. CEO, CRO, VP of sales. Why don't you come down and sit down with the SDRs for an hour and come and hit the phones with them and see if you can outperform them. And that did so much to raise the morale of the SDRs, but also gave the SDRs a little bit of respect, because it's not as easy as you might remember.
Mm-hmm. That's a great story. Great story. Real quick, I wanted to throw a poll up here, and I have a quick story around this. I think it'll help like tie this together, and then I'll kick it back off to you, David. I'm curious for everybody listening here, do you know what number your team is going to hit by the end of May? That's next month. So can you sit down right in front of me? If I was your boss, tell me my team is going to hit X number by the end of May, not the flowery, hey, I think I can, it's going to be this number, or we're going to hit our number, 100%, we're going to be great. Like, can you genuinely tell me? Can you look at the numbers and tell me based on math what number you're going to land? So I'm seeing, I have it up here. We got 5 votes for no, 2 votes for yes. So you can see it's going, most people don't. And I think this goes into directly what Steve is talking about. So when Steve told that story of him looking at the dashboard and reacting to the outcome numbers that he's looking at, it's because he needs to figure out how to change what's going on within the organization. He's on vacation. He has all this anxiety. I can tell you a similar story. When I was running the SDR team at a fintech company, this is years ago, I had a problem where our sales accepted opportunity rate plummeted. And the team asked me, why? Sounds like an easy question. And I had all these theories, and the CEO stopped me and said, no. I want you to go look at the data and tell me why. I'd never done a data analysis in my life. I didn't even know what a pivot table in Excel was at this point. Okay. I'm a young man. It's my first time managing this type of team. So I go and I try to figure it out. I do this big presentation after I figured out the reason why. I figured it out with the data. I was all excited. And I go do this big presentation. I have a slide deck. I'm so slick. I'm in front of the entire executive team. I have board members there. This is a big part of the presentation. And I go through my analysis. And immediately the CEO goes, can you pull up the spreadsheet you used to do this? I pull up the spreadsheet, and he said, probably the scariest thing anyone can tell you when they're looking at your analysis. He said, can you click on D17? If anyone asks to see your formula, it means they are skeptical that it is correct. And I clicked in on it. It was completely wrong. My whole analysis was a bunk because I did one math error. This is the type of stuff that you learn over time. So then that way, to Steve's story there, Steve doesn't have to react based on the numbers that he's seeing. Instead, he can let those numbers tell him where he needs to investigate. And then upon investigation, can give quality feedback to the team. So I'm going to close the poll here, but you can see 80% of people who responded out of 20 folks, 16 of you have no idea where your team's going to end by the end of May. You don't have to be confident you'll have the right answer, but you better have a way to figure out what that number would be. And we could talk about that a little bit. I'll kick it back off to you, David. I just thought this would be helpful to close the loop here.
No, this is absolutely great. I mean, these are the things that a lot of the time people don't talk about this stuff. They talk about the end number. They don't talk about the science behind the actual sales development manager's position. And just like we end up scrolling up, and Darryl, in a moment, I'll let you speak to it. But one of the things that, that I'm reading was if an SDR, or let's say an SDR manager for this example, their director of sales development are requiring them to already know how to do the job. Their bandwidth is very, very small. And so how can those more entry-level sales development managers continue to get these skills to be exactly what that director needs? And that's kind of the fine line where you want a seasoned individual, but what does that leave for the new incoming senior sales development managers and team leads?
I have a couple thoughts on this because I went through this, I would argue, the hard way at a very early stage startup company with an incredibly high pressure. We had just raised Series A, and we ended up having an incredible growth journey, raise a huge Series B, et cetera. So I'd gone through this really pivotal time and had all that pressure on my shoulders. And one thing that I wish I had known back then that I didn't was understanding the expectations of the people above me, regardless if you have the experience. Yeah, it's so important. If you might have the experience, you might not. Let's say you don't, and you don't fully know how to run this team. You have to understand, what does your superior need to see from you to feel confident in your ability? So as a manager of managers, I need to feel confident that my manager has what it takes to drive their team across the finish line. So that you, as the manager, should ask your leader, what are things you want to see from me? What are the main things that you're looking at to help determine that I am in the right role and the right person to help drive this team to high performance? And then on top of that, understand or excuse me, being open with them about where you need some more support to help make the numbers that they're looking at better and more aligned with what they're looking for. So know what they're looking for from you, and then be open about where you're going to need support from them to be able to fulfill on the promises you're making as the leader.
I want to jump back just quickly to the comment that Kyle's making about the data. I just want to bring it full loop because, hey, I don't know if you've heard this. A year ago, this book launched. And apparently there's, and by the way, David Dulany is not my publicist, but if you want to pay me, David, go ahead. Page 95, chapter 6 is all about analysis. That entire chapter is about data. But my eye goes to what's on page 102, which is the 6 key sales development metrics you should track. So I don't want to give it all away. It's all right here. By the way, if you don't have a hard copy of the book, apparently you can go download a Kindle version on Amazon. So there you go. You have options. But data is huge. And one of the things I will tell you on the data side is that too many people are really uncomfortable with data because it's not their natural DNA. We talked about the pivot table example, brilliant example. I often ask a rep, hey, can you read a balance sheet? Do you understand what the basic metrics are? For example, if you're selling SaaS or whatever it is your industry is, do you understand what lifetime value is? Do you understand what customer acquisition cost is? Do you understand what MRR is versus ARR? The list goes on. There's a number of metrics. And Kyle made a point about understanding the numbers that your bosses need to track for success. When I was a CRO, when I was a CMO, it doesn't matter. I had to track my contributions to MRR as an example. That was huge. And mine was not only was that part of my deliverables, it was part of my OKRs. It was also part of my KPIs. It was also part of my variable compensation. So I'm really motivated to understand this. And that's why I need you in your role as an SDR and SDR manager to understand it as well, because it's all about me, don't you know? You make me happy, I'll bring you along with me on the ride. So that's the importance of understanding the data, getting yourself familiar with it, understanding the acronyms, understand what motivates your bosses. So there we go. I saw Steve itching to say something.
Well, I was actually looking at, there's a comment by one of the attendees asking about, what does he do when, he doesn't have a manager who can really dive into it. I think it was DeMarco.
Yep.
And a lot of good stuff in there. But that just really rung true to me. When I was first an SDR, and I switched from, financial services over to the tech world, I went through 5 managers in 4 months. So I never had coaching, and I was off in a satellite office. And so there was like 6 of us off on our own. And you kind of have to dive into it just like you are a manager. You're just managing yourself. And you need to geek out about it. And I look back and I was super frustrated because I wasn't getting the coaching that I needed or wanted. But to be completely honest, that right there forced me to take a look at the job, forced me to look at what needed to be happen to be successful. And that actually led me into leadership. And it's because I was able to do that I was able to better understand here, this is what my people needed. And understand the art side of SDR and the science side of SDR, and kind of put them together to that beautiful mix that we get. So just
it's a blend of art and science, and that's, I think, one of the difficulties laying out the framework is, what are your strengths as a manager, and are you more of the art, messaging, content, understanding the nuances of the market and creating that and being connective tissue with your marketing team, or is your strength more in the data component and the analysis and the spreadsheets, and what can you really double down on as the SDR manager, and then what can you get help with if you're not more of the artistic side and you need to lean on the marketing department more, or on the flip side, if you're not an analyst necessarily, you still need to come up with that material for your boss. And so where can you get help?
And let me jump in here, and I want to David, if you see there's a good question in the chat here that I think we should all talk about. Before we jump into that, let's close the loop on the data stuff, because I have something to give everybody that will help you on this on the journey to become more data driven. So when I first started as a manager, I was definitely more art. You know, my background, I did stand-up comedy for 5 years. I actually dropped out of college to be a comedian. So my whole world was the art. And I was just a people person. I like to laugh, joke around, make people feel good. And I had to learn the data stuff the hard way. And I already shared part of that story. So I have a sheet that I regularly use that I'm going to walk you through here. Let me see. I've never used this tool before. So I'm going to try to, wow, was it that smooth? Did we do it, folks? Okay, can you all see my screen?
No.
Yes.
Now, yes.
Yes, we can. And it's much better than Dulany is. So this is good.
Yes.
Yeah.
Big, beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay, so here, let me walk you through this real quick, and I'll give everybody a copy of this if you want it. So type in yes in the chat, and I'll go ahead and send a copy to everybody who wants one, but or I'll post a link in there. But this is what I'm doing here, is I'm looking at the team average, the average of the top performers, and then I'm looking at the rep that I'm going to be giving coaching to and giving feedback to. So these are fake numbers, so don't get too locked into if they're realistic or not. And I'll just show you what I would do in this specific scenario. So I want to understand the dials, the emails, the connects over the phone, the replies over email, demo set phone, demo set email, demo complete, demo no-showed, and then sales accepted. And these are the only inputs that you put in. The rest are calculations. So when I'll send the sheet out to everybody so you can use it. I'm looking at my rep here that I'm going to be giving coaching to against the team average and the top performer average. So let's take a look here. 1,500 dials, a lot lower than the rest of the team. A bad manager will say this person needs to make more calls. Cool. I'm glad we solved the problem. On to the next. Bad, not good. This is lazy. Spreadsheet management, not good. Emails, higher on email than everybody else. Okay. Connects, lower connects. So I'm looking at all of these numbers. And then I jump to these percentages. And this is where the story gets told. I'm going to tell you the story based on what I see. Yeah. Cool. I have a show rate. 75% is the average. 83 is top performer. This person's at 80. Pretty close. Okay. Good. We're good in that metric. Let's look at the next one. Dial to connect. 5% is the average. 6.46 is top performers. 6.53. Wow. Higher than everybody else. Okay. Okay. This is good so far. Remember, the bad manager would have just told this person to make more calls, right? Well, let's see what the story tells us. Email sent to reply, 1%, 1.15%, and then 1.67. So far, this rep is doing great compared to everybody else. What about phone connect to demo? So you connect with someone on the phone and you booked a meeting. 3%, 3.65, 1.02. Okay, now the story is starting to take shape. This person is actually struggling to convert when they do talk to somebody. Do you think maybe that's why they do less calls? It's because when they do the calls, they're not getting the same results as everyone else is. If I were just to tell this person you need to increase activity, we would not generate a better result. I mean, maybe short term, but we actually have to solve the problem this person is facing, which is conversion on the phone. Email reply to demo on par with everybody else. And then sales accepted rate, similar to everybody else's. So really, if I can get this person from 1% to 3%, just the average, not only would their results be in the top performer, they would be the top performer, even with a lower call volume. That's the magic of data. So I go here, I see that this person needs help converting on the phone. That's all I focus on. How can I help you improve the quality of your conversation so you're booking more meetings through the phone? And then we have completely rounded up this rep and they go from middle to the pack to top performer. That's the power of data. The lazy manager would have focused on the effort that the person's putting in. The smart data-driven manager focuses on where they need to improve to yield real results that are long-lasting. So I wanted to share this real quick. I'll copy the link and I'll share it here. You're not going to have edit access, so make sure you make a copy of the template, but I put this together for y'all.
I want to say that real quick. I think the story isn't just not in the numbers. It's that conversion rates between the numbers. Correct. That's where everything makes the difference. I think that's what you're saying. I had an SDR who had, I think, like a 2.5% correct contact rate on phone calls. And, but if he got a hold of someone, 70% of the time, those calls moved into a demo. And of those demos, 80% of his turn into a next stage call.
Love it.
So yeah, I wanted to work on that like 2% connection rate. How can we make that better? But I wasn't over it. Like, he was my top performing rep, even though his connect rate was the worst on the team. We knew where we could, like, it's nice to know where you can make things a little better, even on your top performing rep.
Right.
I've said to my team a couple times, listen, if your quota is 20 converted meetings in a month, and you make 20 phone calls, and all of those 20 phone calls convert, and all those 20 initial demos convert into a stage 2, my only question is, like, why didn't you make it 21st? You're hitting 100 or straight across the board. Why didn't you go for another one? Get those accelerators. But I'm not going to be upset because he made 20 dials in a month.
And that's the thing I was going to jump in on was I see, Kyle, you're talking about, the importance of the data and the activity. And what I see happen a lot is you have senior leaders, maybe not an SDR manager, maybe typically higher, who have seen a certain channel work for them. It's all about dials. You got to do 80 dials a day. If you're not hitting your conversations, you got to do more dials. It's all about dials. And it's exactly what you said, Steve. It's always the right manager prioritizes outcomes, meetings, conversations over activity. However, that's not an excuse to not do the activity. If you're not hitting the outcomes, then you need to do more activity, improve your technique. But all this is brought to your attention for the following reason. If you do find yourself in an organization where that's all they do is hammer you on as activity, I would opine that you're at the wrong company, that is not an organization you're going to be successful with. So when you're interviewing, ask those questions.
And for the managers here, one thing I'll add to this is I make it very clear, if I'm running an SDR team, every SDR knows as long as we're hitting the outcomes that we're trying to hit here, Kyle doesn't care if you make 2 calls or 200. It does not matter to him because you're hitting the outcomes. But if you're not hitting the outcomes, then you're doing it Kyle's way. And I'll always use data to drive my coaching because I'm not saying you're bad at a specific thing or you need to improve in a certain area. The data is saying this is where we need to improve. It makes a conversation so much easier to have.
Yeah. Kyle, real quick, the number one, feedback that we get on SDR managers from SDRs that we work with is that the SDR manager is just not adding any value. Yeah. They're not giving me anything that's useful and helpful. And so I just sort of tune them out after a while, especially in a remote environment. So if you're not coming with data that's a double click on just activity and really adding, coaching that's helping them, then they're going to tune you out. The other quick thing is we did some data analysis with SDR teams that we were working with, and we noticed that the connect rate was getting close to 0 on calls. And so we double clicked on that a little bit, and it turned out that their calls were coming through as spam or telemarketer on their prospects' cell phones. And all we had to do was have them call us, and they were marked as spam. So had you gone to them and said, "Oh, just make more calls," it's a technical problem. It's not the fact that they're not putting in the effort. So anyways, you gotta dive in and add value to the team, or else they're just gonna tune you out after a while.
I want to highlight what
100 more dials of a 0% conversion rate is still 0.
So true.
Exactly.
What were you saying?
Brian in the chat brought up something interesting. I'll just read it verbatim here. We preach $60 a day based on data, but our first BDR to AE promotion was someone making 40 dials a day on average, and he never once was complained to about it. Other side, we just had somebody with a bad month, and we start by asking why. And at that point, the number of dials does become a piece of the conversation. Should it play into answering the 5 whys? Totally right. Sometimes dials is the answer. I would say typically it's not. Typically there's something deeper there depending on what the extremes are. But sometimes it totally is. It's just, hey, you're not putting in the effort. That's a whole different conversation than someone who's doing a lot of good work and maybe just needs some alignment on the effectiveness of each of the channels that they're prioritizing.
And that's even the point I was making, where I was like activity, dials, or technique, or both, right? Because you can do dials and still suck. And that's because you don't know how to qualify or do engagement. You spend your first 2 minutes saying, hi, how you going? This is Darryl. How's the weather where you're at? I'm in Canada. It's cool. It's still snowing up here. At this point in time, my technique could use some improvement. All right, I'll shut up. You're going to say something profound and incredible. Go.
I was going to say that as you look at it, and if you look from one side, you have dials, right? And then you have your correct contact rate and all the conversion rates all the way through meeting converted and SDR payoff. That's where the SDR gets paid. I found that on one end, the dials is the easiest to control. That's where the SDR has the most influence on what they're doing. But the number that's the most important is the outcome. And so it's like this inverse, it's like a spectrum, right? And what I tell my team is, I've told them, like, listen, kind of like what you were saying. I also want to know, Kyle, when you are talking to your team like that, do you always do it in the third person? But what I wanted to know was what I say is, like, listen, you hit your quota, I don't care. Like, that's great, that's awesome. If you miss it, then let's look at the conversion rate just before that. And if you hit that, if you're and we'll look all the way through. The least important one for me is dials, but sometimes you're right, that is the answer.
And this is exactly why I have it compared to average and compared to top performers, because you're right, Steve. Typically, dials is the last on the list. If you're dealing with somebody who's typically doing well, who's motivated, we're discounting folks who may not be putting in the effort in general. And you kind of spot those people based on attitude. But I put the comparisons there because if you start looking at the conversion rates piece by piece, you have to be able to compare it to what's possible. And if you're not looking at those numbers often enough, you may be saying, hey, we need to improve your conversion, which would make that rep have to have a higher conversion than anyone has ever had in the history of the organization. And that's where you start running into problems. So I really try to be very realistic. Where's our average? Where are the top performers? Where is this individual? And what levers do we have to pull? And I'll pull the levers with that person. Not always in the third person, but sometimes it helps.
I do want to jump in. So we've been talking a little bit here to bring us back because, Denver, you're doing an awesome job, man. Pulling us back around, talking about equipping the SDRs to succeed. Talked about how their day is spent, which is coaching, a lot of that, and the assessment of them. So chapter 5, boys and girls, is on training and coaching. And it goes from page 73 to 92. So it's huge. And we haven't even talked about training. So let's start off. If you want to know how to do the coaching and everything else, and we do everything we just talked about, that's why you got to get the book, chapter 5, go read it. But it does end on the training aspect. We've not talked about that. So Kyle, I happen to see the Vamvouris, hope I say that correctly, 3-month SDR training framework outline ending on page 92. You want to talk a little bit about the importance of training and what you're advocating here and the impact it can make?
Yeah, absolutely. So training is something I'm very, very passionate about, especially in the SDR role. I would argue in the sales role too. There's a lot of training methodology out there. So I'm not going to call one methodology better than the other. And I think they're all useful. I think they're all very good, to be honest with you. What I really look at when it comes to training is consistency being probably the most important. Too often is training a phase. You get a little pressure from your management. You do one type of training, and then you do that for a couple of weeks, and then it falls off. You don't do enough call recordings. You don't listen and give live feedback on the floor. These are the types of things that you have to be doing as consistent part of your training program. And I would sit down and write it out. And in the book, I outline, the 3 months. It's great. You should read it. I'm not going to repeat it here because it's just, I don't want to take over this whole thing. But the idea is have a program. I outline one in the book. Very simple program. Follow that first, but actually have something you hold yourself and the team accountable to. The problem is, stop following through on the promises you make your team, you lose the trust and respect of your team, and that's when things spiral. We also got a very good question around, which I think is actually related, even though it's not directly spoken this way, but Claire was asked any advice for a new SDR manager who started out too lenient with a team of new reps. Yeah, that ends now. You have the choice, right? I often say if, we all choose how we behave in all acts of life. If I walk into a coffee shop and someone messes up my coffee and I scream at them, I chose to scream at them. Why wouldn't you choose to be the best version of yourself? It's your choice. So that ends today. And you don't have to be too lenient moving forward. And how I do that, if there is a reputation that's pretty loose here, is I start picking one high impact thing that is negatively impacting the team's performance, and I make the change. So maybe that's you don't care about how many connects they have in a day. I'm just going to throw out random, or what time they come in. Like there's certain things that maybe are negatively impacting the team that you're going to want to make sure that they're doing. You pick that one thing and you say, hey, everybody, this is me, your friend that you know and love. Here's what I've observed. Because we don't have enough focus on this one thing, we're not hitting our targets. So moving forward, what I would like to do, if you guys are all in it with me, I would like to put our focus on improving that one area. Is everybody on board with this? Yeah, we're on board. Okay, great. Because that you were lenient, they probably like you. They're going to have a almost like a social responsibility to help kind of go on this journey with you. And once you do the first thing and you start seeing the results from the first thing, you do the second thing, you do the third thing, and you start behaving in the way that you know is going to lead to most results. People don't want a lenient manager. They want someone who's going to push them to grow and become better. And if you can do that, you're going to have people who will follow you around for life.
I think you need to make.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, I was just going to say that a concept that we go into a little bit in the book is throughput and the theory of constraints. And it's essentially what Kyle's saying is you look at the constraints that are impacting the throughput to creating your consistent pipeline. And I bet, like as Kyle mentioned, there's 2 or 3 things that you can think of immediately that are impacting the throughput of your pipeline production. And it could be any of those metrics that we discussed to, as you said, today's the day you can start to impact just one of those. And the good news is it's job security for you as a manager, because there's always something being impacted on the throughput of the, factory that you're creating. And you can always put your investigation hat on and figure out something that's broken in the process and start to address that.
I think one thing it's important to do too is just be straight with your reps. Just tell them, hey, listen, we missed our number this last month.
Yeah.
And I hate losing. Personally, I hate losing more than I like winning. And we're never going to do that again. So let's make that adjustment. What do we need to do to make that adjustment? And if you can do it on your own, great. But if it's not working, let's do it my way. And if it doesn't work, we'll adjust. I'm not here to trip you up. I'm here to make sure that we're all successful. And, I had a rep one time who, I wanted him to come in at a certain time. And he said, if I'm in there 10 minutes later, what difference does it make? And I said, well, for me, it's an indicator that you're on board. Like the reason I want you to end it at this time, you're right. 10 minutes after that, in the grand scheme of things, it's not going to help you close that many more deals or get in touch with that many more contacts. But it's an indicator to me, are you on board? Are you in? And when I had that conversation with him, it was like a light bulb clicked. And he was never late after that. And he just bought into the whole system. I think sometimes you need to let him know you're not just being a dictator or a tyrant. There's a method to what you're doing, and let him in on the method, right? Let him know why.
The one thing I want to jump in on, we talked a lot about training now, as we coaching now, training. What we haven't talked on a related note on the training is that there's different ways people learn, right? So you can learn from the SDR manager, or maybe you have a sales enablement person or both, what have you, and you can learn on your own. But sometimes people learn best or are convinced, maybe because there's some personality dynamics at play here with the employee and manager, from community. So not that because they're hosting it, but because it's relevant to what we're talking about today. Tenbound.com is another example of a community that you can go to get additional training that's built on sound principles. So I want to bring out, there are communities out there. That's one example that you can go to, you can bounce ideas off of. They can become your accountability partners. I also want to point out that way back when in the conversation, one of the questions I got asked was about, do we hire builders or followers. And I don't know if you want to have that conversation, but what I will point out is in the book, chapter 3, page 41, talks all about hiring. It goes deep, including talking about personality and SDR types. So you want to talk about builders and followers. It's all right there, kids. Chapter 3 in the book.
Darryl, you know that book so well. I love it.
How many times have you read it there, Darryl?
You know what I'm doing? I'm going through the table of contents. It works. Just putting it out there.
Yeah.
I would have thought you read it like 652 and a half times. I mean, I don't know.
I have a man crush on Mr. Dulany. I will admit it. So there we go.
Fair.
Well, I mean, Darryl, we talk about the art and science. I mean, the hiring is so critical. And, you know, if you think about it, if you have a team of A players and A+ players, you know, and however you define that, you know, we give a framework in the book, but it just makes your life so much easier as a manager, you know, if you put the time in to do that. And there's so many pressures a lot of time on a SDR manager to staff up quickly and just get some people in the seats, you know, because we got a bunch of funding and we need to go to market quickly. You know, take your time, implement a process that's effective, and do your best to keep it as a really high performance team with some of the tips that we give in the book.
Can we answer this next question here from Lauren? Because I think it's a good one. Is friendly competition and encouragement for low performers? And I'm going to elaborate on this question a little bit because I have run into plenty of times where you have these competitions that are meant to get people really motivated and excited and trying to win all these prizes. And then you have these low, you know, maybe 2 low performers who they don't get the same excitement because they just feel like it's not going to be attainable for them. So I have a few thoughts on this. Is friendly competition and encouragement for low performers? Yes, if it's a metric that they have really direct control of. If it's something that they feel like they don't. So, you know, some SDR teams, they compensate on deals closing. That's not going to be a great metric to have some friendly competition around because the AEs are responsible for closing, not them. So I try to keep it as close to what they can control as possible as far as friendly competition when you're involving some lower performers. But one thing I want to add here that I think would be pretty helpful is once you have your handle on the data and specifically those conversion rates of each different spot that we were talking about earlier, you can start giving people what I call superpowers. I think a lot of people call these things superpowers, things that they happen to be uniquely good at that no one else is, or that people aren't. Now, here's an example. Your lowest performer might have a 90% show rate. Everyone else has a 70% show rate. Well, all of a sudden, even your top performer has something to learn from the lowest performer. And if you use the data, and then sometimes data is not going to tell us, so you need some, you know, like, oh, you're very good at the intro, right? Sometimes you need to dig a little bit to try to find something. I assign every rep a superpower, and then I use that so they can give feedback to the rest of the team on the thing that they're uniquely good at. So just something to think about beyond just competition that also helps some of those lower performers gain confidence, which can snowball into higher performance across the board.
Mix it up. Mix up the competitions. You know, don't have it all be about that final outcome. Don't have it all. I like to do individual competitions. I like to do group people together, and I'll put, you know, a high performer with a middle performer and a low performer, trying to raise them all up, right? And you know, some of the best things I've seen is, you know, we had a competition one time where the teams all like they huddled together and they came up with team names, and then, you know, I had someone who just hated to lose, and so he had a low performer on his team. He was not going to let that low performer let him lose to what's traditionally the number 2 guy. So he reached back out, like they strategized every morning. Hey, this is what we want to do. This is how you do it. You know, and he changed up. So sometimes, you know, the higher performer, he's a bit of a disadvantage. We've done 1 versus 2. You know, like let's see who can take down the king. You know, and play around with it.
No, and Steve, you bring up such good points there. I think one of the things that really touched was when I was looking at some data when I was managing, the fact of being, you know, a team lead, they would look at the data of what the connects were via email and the people that were getting high connects versus not so much. Doing those competitions, someone that's your top performer and a lower one. So that way when you pair them out, they will be able to see, or the lower performer. I mean, obviously you don't need to tell that person specifically you're paired because, right? But they will be able to get those tips and tricks of being able to see, hey, this is what's working. And then they can work together as a group. And so I think that's brilliant that you brought that up, and absolutely love that.
Yeah. And Dave, I was just going to say one thing about going back to the training program that you put together is a lot of times the manager feels like I have to come up with the entire training curriculum, and we have to set up a curriculum for the next 3 months, an hour a week. What am I going to do with with this? And bring in your team, get those super high performance, people that are really good at one thing, even if they're not necessarily the top SDR, but they're really good at this one thing. That could be a training program for the rest of the team. So you don't have to come up with everything in the curriculum yourself. You can bring in SDRs who are really good at things. You can bring in people from other parts of the company who can explain various parts. You can bring in customers to talk about how they use the product. There's all sorts of different ways that you can spread out the work a little bit on the training program, because everyone's got that superpower that they can train the team on.
Can I bring up a question I want to ask we haven't talked about? The answer is yes, by the way. What I see happen a lot of the SDR teams, a reason that they may underperform, is I see a bad habit. Maybe it's generational, where they avoid certain channels. So, for example, I see many SDR teams avoid the phone. They're convinced, or said another way, hide solely behind email. All right. I see other teams not really use social selling as a vehicle at all. It's almost like they have to begrudgingly. How much of that, gentlemen, my esteemed colleagues here, is what's the word I'm looking for here, is inherent in the manager, the SDR manager, versus the organization? Because I have worked at companies where the leadership is like, social. Nobody's on social. And what they're really saying is they're not on social.
Yeah. I think it's a bit of both. I think for the most part, a lot of the culture should come from the direct manager of that team. And if above you, they don't believe in social to follow this example, and you're not able to convince them on social, I feel like that's your responsibility. You need to prove that social works. I don't think there's a problem with going to your manager saying like, look, this is what I'm seeing from the front lines, right? My team's executing on. We're seeing some early signs of success using social as a channel. I'm going to do this experiment. This is how I'm going to run it. We're going to be tracking these KPIs. And if we generate X result, I'll know it's successful. And then I'm going to have them focus more on social, because clearly it's a channel that works for us. And then run the experiment. I have yet to find a senior leader, regardless of how passionate they are about their opinions, not say, run the experiment. That's fair. Run the experiment. And if it's true and social does work well for you, it'll bear out in the numbers, and then they're going to change their mind.
We have a deal that we're working right now that came through an unconventional channel. And I was talking to the chairman of our company yesterday, and he's like, so how'd we find this? And I told him, and he goes, wow, that never happens. That we never find deals that way. I'm like, I know, but we did. And his instant reaction wasn't, well, don't do it anymore. It was, how do we do that again? Right? How do we duplicate that? And I think if you go to them with results saying, hey, listen, we're seeing some success in social and we're seeing good positive traction. If your leadership still says, yeah, but don't do it anymore, go see Darryl's previous comment. You need to be looking at a different company. You're at the wrong place.
Totally. And all the senior executives speak math. So if you can bring a little bit of data to them, that's the language of love when it comes to business. So they're going to follow through. Exactly. We got a couple other questions here that I think we should all weigh in on, since we're getting close to time. There's two specifically that just came through. So James said, our organization is a no commission org. Therefore, how would you recommend to get SDRs to buy in towards the outcome? I'll say personally, I have zero experience in no commission orgs. I'm not a huge believer in the no commission model. I would probably focus more on just the outcomes you're trying to get. But if anybody here has a better take, follow that.
Get your organization to be a commission org.
I
hate to say it, but like for me, I have zero experience with it. I don't know what would motivate an SDR to do their job like that unless you're giving them some sort of bonus.
I'm pretty
there
sure
at the end.
Harvard Business Review did a study on this too, and salespeople perform better under quotas. It's tough for me to give feedback there. Should I go to the next one, or does someone else have?
I'll just add one element. If you're stuck with that and you can't change it beyond the advice you've just heard, I would suggest you can implement some kind of gamification, right? So you're not giving commissions, but maybe you're giving them, $100, whoever sells the most this week, or you're giving them, a $10 gift card to Starbucks. You come up with the rewards. So it's a compromise.
Or career pathing. I think that's a place where career pathing would be useful, where you say, hey, listen, what do you want to do next? Okay, be successful here. And then, that's an option. The ultimate, in the end, though, it's all about incentive. How do we incentivize, that good behavior?
Yeah. For example, if you finish in first place, you get to keep your job. And then
that's what That's what I was going to say. I mean, getting a paycheck every 2 weeks, sounds pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Here's another one here. To get everybody's take on. Do you believe there's a difference in sales development based in different countries? In Sweden, cold calling is a bit inefficient, for example. Now, I work with a lot of companies that have global teams. It depends if they're selling into the United States or not. I typically find, it's a little bit different. So if you have SDRs that are calling into Europe, it's going to be a little bit of a different motion. Those calls sound a bit different. The nature of communication is a bit different. So I find, I do see a difference. I'm curious to hear everyone else's take.
The answer is yes.
I mean, I was just going to say, my opening speech at the last Tenbound conference was about the scientific method, and it's essentially, just look it up on Wikipedia after the webinar. The answer to all of those questions is using the scientific method. Make a hypothesis, test the hypothesis, report back on the data, and then come up with a new hypothesis continually over and over and over again for the rest of your life in sales development. I'm a little exasperated because that's basically all it is. It doesn't matter what you're selling or what country you're in or, what you're trying to do. Apply the scientific method and keep going.
For sure. And, as we kind of wrap things up today, I just feel so grateful, like so many brilliant minds on the call. I just want to say thank you, Darryl, David, Kyle, Steve. Like it's a lot of fun. I can really hear the passion in all of your voices in regards to sales development in the framework. The book's amazing. Bottom line, if you don't have a copy, you're going to get a copy. That is what we're going to be doing. So please, the folks that are still on, if you want, just in the next 2 minutes here, end up saying that you want the book, and we will start taking notes of who those people are, and we'll send you on a link and send that to your house. And that transitions into the last piece here is within those books, there is going to be 3 folks that is going to get the Tenbound Plus VIP membership. And ultimately, when I say it's going to be in the book, this is going to be virtual for the golden ticket, of course. So you're going to know end of day Friday. Once again, value $2,148. What is Tenbound Plus? It's a private peer-led community forum, and this is really going to be awesome place to meet some of the top executives in the SaaS space. It's going to be a place where you can build your network and build your personal brand and get to know like-minded individuals. So that way, if you're looking to do a business-to-business deal, like you know the people. And it's a great way of doing that, as well as like live weekly group coaching calls, like where we're able to share different types of like Excel spreadsheets. Like Kyle, you were so kind earlier. Let me know your Venmo so I can send you like the $300 for that. This is going to be really good stuff. We've taken the notes on the engagement. So the folks that engaged the most today is going to get more tickets to potentially win the ticket itself. So overall, thank you so much for joining. Final thoughts to the authors and/or Darryl or Steve.
I want $300 too. How do I get in on that?
Send it to everybody. Like David Dulany, we wrote the book together. We're kind of stuck together, but I want to say, Beard, David, Steve, Darryl, I really appreciate you guys coming together and
kindred souls
1 year. Well appreciated on my side. I know you guys have a lot of stuff that you work on, so to take an hour to come chat with these fools, I really appreciate it.
This is great. I just
fine.
proposed
Thank
that next year, David, grow a beard.
I'm
Yeah.
I'm over here trying.
go.
I promise. I'll grow one for the next book.
If anybody can guess how old David Dulany was on page 159 when this photo was taken, I don't think he hit puberty yet, but there's bonus marks in it for you if you want it.
How much Venmo? How much? What
Yeah,
was
I don't know. I mean,
I'm still using my high school picture.
I love it. Gentlemen,
Guys.
thank you so much. Have a wonderful day, everyone on the call. Thanks again, and we look forward to seeing you to the next webinar and conferences. See you on June 2nd. Don't forget to sign up for the Sales Development Tactical here at Tenbound. Later.